All right. Welcome to the Sea of Grace podcast. I am your host, Chris Easley, and tonight I am joined by Mike Tenney. Mike Tenney is he's a Catholic speaker. He is a worship leader, and he's also the host of the podcast Pop Culture Catechism. No, I'm sorry. I got that wrong already. Pop Culture Catechism.
Close enough.
Mike, how did I do that with that intro?
I think that's fine. Yeah,
awesome.
I mean, that's what I do. So,
All right. Awesome. So I have a funny story about how I found Pop Culture Catechism. Well, it's not that funny. It's kind of actually a little bit sad, but no, I'm joking. So I have a background in communication sciences, and so my dream in college was to become a filmmaker, and that I had this secret agenda that I was going to take on Hollywood from the inside and instill like Christian virtue everywhere, right? Due to some decisions I made in life, I had to pursue another career path. But I said, you know what? I'm gonna like the easiest thing to do is a podcast. And so once I started to have this like a reversion and rediscover my faith, it was mainly through podcasts. So I was consuming everything, Scott Hahn, Catholic Answers, EWTN Radio. And so I had this idea, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and have a podcast. I'm going to do like movie reviews, TV reviews, music, and I'm going to find like the Catholic perspective of it. I'm sure no one's ever done this before, right? I thought, all Catholic media was just apologetics or academic theology. And so years went by, I kind of sat on that idea. And then like the algorithm threw on YouTube, it threw me one of your videos and I saw just the name Pop Culture Catechism. And I'm like, no way, that's my idea. So I popped it. I got into the video. I can't remember which one I saw first, but yeah. And I'm looking through it and I'm like, oh my gosh. And then Mike, like you actually have a degree in theology. Is that right?
Yep. I do.
Yeah. And then it's like you're quoting Theology of the Body from John Paul II and everything. And I'm like, this is amazing. And I can't compete with that. So kudos to you. You're doing an amazing job there. I really like what you guys are doing there. So yeah, Mike, I had the privilege of getting to meet you a few months ago, and you teased me a little bit with sharing your testimony. And for the viewers here, I've not heard your story. So I'm walking into this blind. So I'm going to be just as surprised as you are.
All right.
Well, I guess we could start knowing a little bit more about yourself. Tell me kind of where does your story start?
Well, so I grew up in a Catholic family. We went to Mass. We prayed before meals. We prayed before bed. But it wasn't like a super vibrant part of our life. My dad wasn't Catholic until just a couple of years ago. So it was mainly my mom. And I think she had a deep love for God, but it was very personal. She would talk to us about God a little bit. Well, we weren't one of these super Catholic families that was like doing holy hours and going to the rosary and
right.
talking about God every day. It was kind of one of the things that we did. Like we were on the swim team and we also went to church, and that was kind of the extent of it. And my mom, she would say, God's like the most important thing, but it didn't really feel like it wasn't like a vibrant everyday part of our life. And I believed in God and I would pray sometimes, but where my faith really came alive for me was we had a really awesome youth group at our parish, and our youth minister, she just had a way her name was Terry, and she had a great way of just bringing in everyone. And we had kids from the local public school who would come who weren't even Catholic. I remember there was a Jewish kid that came on a lot of our retreats.
Wow.
Because he just loved being a part of the community, and it just really made you feel loved. And so my older brothers were involved there, and a couple of our friends were really involved there. And so I just really had a deep experience of Christ right after my confirmation in 8th grade. That following year, my 9th grade year, it was kind of a snowball. It all happened at the same time. I got confirmed, and then I went into high school and I went from public school to Catholic school. So all of a sudden I'm taking religion classes and like learning about the faith. And I'm like, this is actually interesting stuff, getting a little bit of philosophy and theology and that sort of thing. And then in the middle of my freshman year, just God blew my world open on this retreat where I met other people that like really cared about their faith and weren't afraid to talk about it. And I was, an insecure freshman, like most of us are when we're freshmen. And I just felt like, man, these kids have something that I want. I don't know what it is, but they just seem free. And I want that. And there was some older college kids who were on the retreat and some young adults in the church that were on the retreat. And I just saw so many different types of people that were vibrantly alive and loved God. And I was never the same. And I went back to my Catholic school and I was all in on religion classes and like the campus ministry stuff. And I was all in on my youth group from there. When it was time to go to college, I was like, where's the most Catholic place I can go? And I grew up just outside of Washington, D.C. So I went to Catholic University of America. And I heard that they have this thing called adoration where they like pray and sing songs and, to Jesus on Wednesday night. And just everyone cares, not everyone, but there's a really vibrant Catholic community there. So that's where I wanted to go. And yeah, I even more so there got really into ministry and almost became a Franciscan for a while, Dominicans for a little while. Just, I had a nice little quarter life crisis in college where I was going on mission trips and breaking up with my girlfriend because I was like, I think God's calling me to be a priest. I remember it was like 2002, the Feast of St. Therese, 2003, somewhere in there. I remember being in adoration and feeling like God reached out from the void and told me, you're going to be a priest. And I like broke down crying and like told our chaplain, and he was like, okay, well, we're going to work on this. We're going to pray and we're going to like get you spiritual direction and stuff. But like shots out of the blue, like they're great, but like discernment is more than just like one day in adoration. So he kind of like talked me off the ledge a little bit, Right. So that spawned like a several years long discernment process. And I eventually did not end up becoming a priest. I'm been married for about 10 years now and have a couple kids and a couple cats and a dog. And yeah, so so after college, I went to college as an education major, English and education. So I was a certified English teacher coming out of college, but I ended up doing a year of volunteer work with the Capuchin Franciscans in New York, working at a youth center. So I did that for a year. And then I started teaching at a Catholic high school, religion and English. And I did that for like 14 years and also was in a rock band on the side. And slowly over the years, I did less and less of the rock band thing and more of the worship thing and giving talks on retreats. And when the band finally stopped playing, it just kind of made sense for me. I was asked by a bunch of different people to do music and talks in different places. And so it just kind of became this Mike Tenney music ministry thing. And during COVID, I ended up quitting my job as a Catholic high school teacher and being a stay-at-home dad. And now I do my ministry stuff kind of on the side. And that's when I started Pop Culture Catechism through Awaken Catholic. And that's been a wild ride as well. So that's the short version. I know that wasn't particularly short, but yeah.
No, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. No, it is beautiful to hear. So again, what you're saying, you kind of grew up Catholic. Did that look like you were still going to regular mass?
We were going to church on Sundays, but like if we were on vacation, maybe it wasn't a priority. If we were traveling, maybe my mom was like, "Oh, we're traveling. There's a dispensation." I don't know whether there was or not, but like that's what she said. So it wasn't like I said, like it was important to her, and she tried to impress it on us, but it wasn't necessary. Like I said, we weren't praying the rosary after dinner every night. We weren't going to daily mass. I didn't know what adoration was. I didn't pray a rosary till I was in college. So it wasn't like our family wasn't steeped in the Catholic traditions or whatever. It was just kind of one of many things that we did that were important to us. So it wasn't really till our youth group that really my brothers and I all in our youth group got serious about God, and that actually drew my parents in more. So
that's beautiful.
Yeah, it was really cool.
I'm sure there was some like a process from going from just, you're formed and you received this formation as a kid. And I don't know if you went to I'm sure, to prepare for sacraments, you go through like the basic, I guess. Yeah,
we went to CCD, which is like catechism class once a week for an hour, and I hated it. But once I got to Catholic school in high school, we just had some really good teachers that really asked us like some deep questions about life, the universe, and everything. And so that grabbed me in a way that the religious ed classes that I'd gone to before really didn't. So I really latched onto the intellectual side of the faith. The other thing that I think really sparked my faith in high school was I became best friends with a girl who was Presbyterian, and she and kind of her whole crew of friends, she went to the Catholic school, but she started inviting all her Catholic friends to Bible study. And so that was the first time I'd really read the Bible in a serious way, was at this Bible study with a bunch of my Catholic friends and a bunch of her like Presbyterian church friends. And they were praying praise and worship music. And that was when I was first starting playing guitar. So I got really into that. And, I started getting challenged by some of the kids at her youth group about the saints and the sacraments are these empty works. And so I started reading and studying and searching online about, what are the answers to this thing? So that really engaged me and got me to kind of seek out the intellectual side of the faith a little bit more.
Right. Yeah. So going from, I guess, again, from your basic formation as a child to once you come to this, that was this youth group, right? So yes, it is very much the intellectual side that sometimes gets us to go over and jump and go, kind of free fall into the faith. I don't know, what was that like for you? Like, I guess the experience of saying like faith is actually deeper than I thought. Like there's more beauty to it than I thought. You're on fire.
Yeah, I think looking back now, it's easy to see the way that God's hand was working. I couldn't have put this together at the time, but just realizing that I got confirmed, and then I went to Catholic school, and then I went on this retreat, and then I got plugged in with all the these Catholic friends, and then these Presbyterian friends who were challenging me and causing me to go deeper. Like, it really is kind of a wonderful tapestry that the Lord wove together for me. But I think it started with just that experience of going on the retreat and feeling accepted. I felt like I had so much pressure on me to be a good kid and to be a good student and to be a good athlete and to live up to the expectations I felt like were set by my brothers, because they were super smart and great athletes and popular with the girls. And so I just felt like all this pressure to be a good kid and be popular and be successful in all the various different ways. And going on that retreat and hearing kids talk about like problems in their families and how they relied on God. And like, I was afraid to tell people that I believed in God. And I would pray at night and like ask for stuff. But it was the first time I saw people who lived with I said this word before, like a freedom, and I wanted it. And also on that retreat, a couple things happened. Is one, I went to confession, and I'd been to confession, but I was like really like, I'm going to say everything. There was a couple key sins that I thought were like too bad to actually say out loud. And I was like, I went in and I was pumping myself up, getting hyped up, and I said them to the priest, and I kind of held my breath, and like, he was not impressed, obviously. He's heard everything a 15-year-old has done. Yeah. So it just said, they're forgiven. And I went, and I just came out of that confession feeling like I was flying. I remember it was free time, and I came out of confession, and I like went to the soccer field, and I just like ran, because I like all this energy. I was like running through the soccer field, like, I'm alive. And
that feeling, man.
Yeah. And they taught us how to pray in a different way. I remember one of my older brother's friends was a college student, and he came and gave a talk on prayer, and he talked about speaking to God as a friend and not just using like the memorized prayers. And that really spoke to me. And I remember that night they gave us time to go off and pray by ourselves, and just sitting by this lake with like the reeds and the frogs and the lake, the wind blowing on the lake, and talking to God like a friend. And that started like the next level of my prayer life. It wasn't just going to bed like, help me on this test, say a Hail Mary. It was something deeper. And so I came away from that retreat feeling like, I know God is real, and he has spoken to me. He's not just like George Washington, this guy I studied that, was probably a historical figure a long time ago. Like, no, this Jesus is real, and he has spoken to me, and he has a plan for my life, and he loves me. And I have this community of people that love me and appreciate me, even though I feel really insecure. And oh my gosh, I'm forgiven for these like things I was ashamed of, and I can move forward. And yeah, just I felt coming off that retreat like St. Paul getting knocked off his horse. And actually my one of my best friends at the time, I wrote him like a 5-page letter about like how he needed to come to my youth group and come on this retreat and like follow Jesus.
It happens. So everyone who's a convert or a revert, we have this obnoxious phase where we're just like so on fire for the Lord, and we just want to share it. We want everyone to have that same experience, and it's like, no, you don't get it. Like I can see things now in a way that I've never seen them before. And
but you know what's beautiful is, you know, he and I, because I went to Catholic school, he and I were kind of drifting at that time anyway, just because we were going to different schools. And we were in scouts together, and he ended up leaving the scout troop. So we just didn't see each other much anymore. You know, there wasn't like a falling out or whatever. But he got my letter, and he was like, I talked to him. I was like, did you get my letter? Did you read it? He was like, yeah, it's a little weird, but you know, good for you, man. You know, I'm glad you had a great experience. You know, and I think maybe his family was Christian. Maybe they went to church sometimes, but I hadn't talked to him in years. And because of Pop Culture Catechism, I got a message from him on Instagram a couple years ago, and he was like, hey man, I love what you're doing with this show. I really love this last one. And I was like, oh, thanks. I didn't know you listened. He's like, of course, man. You were like the first person to tell me about Jesus. And I was like, what?
Wow.
He's like, yeah. He's like, yeah. And I probably never would have met my wife if it wasn't for that. So I don't know the whole story because we haven't had a chance to like reconnect. Right. But I was like, oh, when I was 15, I thought I was totally overzealous and did this super cringy, awkward Christian thing. And maybe the Lord was able to use that, you know? So
praise be to God.
Yeah, praise be to God. And again, I don't know the whole story, but that's the message he sent me. So yeah, awesome. God can use even your cringiest moments.
Exactly. Yeah. So those are early teenage years, and I mean most teenage years. They're pretty rough, and we go through a lot of things intellectually. We go through a lot of things physically. I mean, we start to discover our bodies in different ways. And so that's a lot of times, especially for men, like sin just creeps in there. And that's, those are some pretty dark years sometimes. And I mean, to be able to have gone from, I mean, just because I can relate so much, in my teen years, that's when I started to actually fall away from the church. So, I was raised also, I'm a cradle Catholic. So I had my baptism, first communion, from ages like 0 to 10. I mean, we would go occasionally to mass. We would go to Christmas and Easter, and then just throughout the year, sometimes, right? But I still, you know, had to prep for first communion, then later confirmation. I then moved to Mexico. And in my time in Mexico, I mean, I lived literally across the street from church. So there was no excuse. There was no excuse to not go to youth groups or to not go to church. So I was right there. And my whole family is very, very, they're just very devout. Like my grandma she was leading the Bible studies for adults. 2 of my aunts are catechists there. So like, I think I received like a very good formation there, and still like in my teen years, I started to just fall away. And yeah, and then actually it was not until like I always still believed, but I had a completely lost faith in the institution of the church. Yeah. So yeah, until like my later, almost until into my adult life, is when, you know, I had, again, our Protestant brothers and sisters can teach us a thing or two sometimes, because I had my wife and kids, we moved back to the States, and we had some friends, they're Protestant, and they invited us to a Bible study, right? And I was like, oh, but they're not Catholic. And I'm like, I had never encountered Protestants in my life. So I was very hesitant at first, and I'm like, yeah, I got tricked into like, hey, come to dinner and stay for the Bible study that they didn't tell me about. And it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. Like, it was just, let's read scripture. How does it speak to you? And turns out like they had other people from different backgrounds. So there's Baptists, Methodists, some that went to Methodist church, some non-denominational, and like everyone was just like sharing the love for Jesus. And it's like, okay, they would also invite us like, hey, come to our church. And I'm like, okay, if I say no, I need to say why I'm saying no, what I'm saying no to, and why. And it's like, okay, I actually need to see like what my faith teaches. And that's when I went and did a whole deep dive there. But
yeah, I feel like as Catholics at the Mass, we get a lot of scripture kind of sprinkled throughout the Mass and the different prayers and through the years. And then of course there's the first reading, the Psalm, and the second reading, and the Gospel. And it's all thematically tied, at least on Sundays and feast days and stuff. And but there, unless you are in a Bible study or a religious ed class that has you go through it, you don't get as much of like the story. Like you don't just sit down and like, we're going to read the Gospel of Mark. And so the value that I found in going to this Presbyterian youth group was we picked a book and we went all the way through it and talked about it all the way through. And just this, again, I was an English major in college. I've always loved stories, always loved writing stories and songs. And I'm just a sucker for a good story. Right. So reading through the gospel and being like, oh, this is the story of Jesus. It sounds dumb to say, but like, oh, so he got on a boat and then he got off and there was a crowd there. So he got back on the boat to talk. And then he was like mad at the apostles. So he went up on the mountain and then they left in a boat and then he didn't have a ride. So then he had to walk and like, oh, it all connects. Like there's a reason why this happens. And then this happens, like it's not just like random events that are, strung together. There actually is a sequence and this was a real guy. So I felt like when I started to read the Gospels as literature, I felt like I got to know Jesus in a way. And whenever I have doubts in my faith about, is this all made up? Is this, I think a lot of us have those doubts sometimes. Just you get overwhelmed by the world and you have these doubts in your mind. I always go back to Jesus and like, even if I'm wrong, I still want to be like Jesus. He's even if I'm wrong, I still this character that I believe is real, but even if he's just a character, that's the sort of character I want to be. That's what I want my character to be. It's like this guy, Jesus, and just the concern he has for people, the way he stands up to bullies, the strength and the gentleness, the lion and the lamb, the total love he has even for his oppressors, like the Romans, and then the ability to stand up to even the people who are supposed to be authority figures and say, this isn't going to cut it. And I just love how I just love him. Jesus, I love you. You're awesome. I want to be more like you.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, like we have at my basic formation, and I always heard all these Bible stories and a lot of them are just watered down. And sometimes we're just looking at like, there's like I don't want to say like the superficial message, but I guess what the plain reading of it. But yeah, once I started again digging deeper into the beauty of our faith, and I learned from Scott Hahn, I heard him talking about typology. I had never heard about that before. Yeah. And he's explaining specifically, it was when he was talking about Marian typology, and like my mind was just like I was mind blown. It's like, what? And it's like, yeah, talking about like literature, like from how it's like there's the type and the antitype, and it's like it's the old or the new is foreshadowed in the old, the old is revealed in the new, and it's just it's such a beautiful way of like learning. Yeah, just learning about our faith in general. So beautiful.
Did you get to meet Scott Hahn when we were at the St. Paul's Seminary?
I did, and I made such I walked up and I was all awkward and being like, oh my gosh, I want to thank you so much, Dr. Hahn.
I didn't get a chance to talk to him. Everyone was kind of crowding around him, and I was like, I'll let people who really want to get up there talk to him. But he was very instrumental for my dad when my dad finally a few years ago became Catholic.
Okay,
a couple books that he looked into from Scott Hahn were really helpful for him. So I think a lot of us owe a lot to Dr. Hahn.
Absolutely. Now I know you're a very talented musician. How did that come about?
Yeah, I didn't come from a family of musicians. I like some of my cousins and stuff were musicians, but I think as a youngest child, I always wanted to be the center of attention. So I was always kind of into performing, but at the same time, I kind of felt like that wasn't cool. So I was kind of scared to do it. I was more of an athlete because that was what cool guys did. You're tough and you did tough athletic stuff. And then it was really I had done a little bit, like I think I'd done a play or two in middle school. Maybe I was in choir for a year in elementary school. I think I played saxophone for like a year, but like nothing really grabbed me. I was like listening to music a lot. But it was really on that retreat. It's interesting the way my faith life and my music life grew. One of the things on that retreat, I remember in one of those prayer sessions, it was right around the time we were signing up for classes next year, and thinking, I want to sign up for choir. And yeah, I kind of had always been too scared to do that before because I didn't want to be one of those wimpy music kids. But I was like, no, I've always wanted to do this. I've always been into music. I'm going to sign up for choir. And I had an awesome choir teacher in high school, taught us like all about the liturgy and how to sing at the liturgy, and like took us to different churches around DC to sing. It was awesome, and taught us a lot about just like how to sight read and various stuff. And that summer, just a few months later, my brother did Jesuit volunteer corps. And he couldn't take his guitar with him because he was like going to Seattle. So he left his guitar at home. And I knew like 3 guitar chords, and the internet was a new thing. And so I could look up like Dave Matthews guitar chords on the internet. And I taught myself guitar. And I had
the chords, or were you looking at tabs?
I was looking at tabs and chords. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
A lot of tabs, a lot of chords. And yeah, I just kind of started playing. I was pretty bad for a while, but I was youngest child, always wanted attention, so I didn't have any qualms really about getting in front of people and playing badly. And slowly by little bit, I got a little less bad and a little less bad. And by the time I got to college, I was actually pretty decent. And I say I majored in English and education in college, but really I majored in music ministry.
Right.
I was playing guitar and singing like every night of the week. And I had a lot of friends in the music school, and I was taking some voice lessons and taking some a couple theory classes just on the side, even though I wasn't a music major or anything. And just I had a couple music theater suite mates one year, and I'd be like, what about this chord? Why does this chord go with this chord? And they like taught me music theory in our dorm rooms. Shout out to Andy.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. So
that is awesome.
Yeah. I had a lot of just experiences like that at Catholic U. And yeah, I would recommend taking more lessons than I did. Like I never took guitar lessons. I didn't take voice lessons until way too late. Like I'd be a lot better if I had studied a little bit more, but I kind of did it the old wannabe rock star way, and just kind of.
That's the way to do it. I mean, that's how
I don't know. I'd be better if I did it the other way. Sometimes I wish I could go back and do it, and I'd be a better musician.
Yeah, I think there's people who you say, or they would say that they're naturally talented, or maybe we might say that about them. But whether it's music or just like artists of doing like painting or drawing, or say, oh, you're just naturally gifted. And there's a lot of people. There's a lot of people who they say like, if I would have gone like the traditional learning way of doing classes and learning these techniques, it's like I don't know if I'd be able to do this or not. And yeah, I don't know.
I am not one of those prodigies. I would have benefited a lot from. There's been several times in my life like I'm trying to learn a song and I'm like, oh, that's how you're supposed to do that. And it's like some super basic technique on the guitar that I've been doing wrong for years. And I have to like unlearn everything and relearn it the right way. And if I just had a guitar teacher to show me like, this is the way you do it. Anyway. So yeah, I'm a big fan of have the passion, have some natural ability, but also like, listen to the professionals.
Yeah. I was kind of just self-taught. So I played in like as in probably my 20s or late teens, early 20s, I was like in a punk rock band. And that's like the easiest thing to do, like the chords.
Yeah, power chords. Yeah,
that's all you got to do. And I was actually never into listening to punk rock. But it was like, hey, that's what my friends were playing and they needed a guitar player. So I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll join. And I just kind of got into the scene. But yeah, I'm just kind of self-taught, and I would have probably benefited from some lessons too. Yeah. Did you, once you started to go deeper into your faith, did you feel like there were any kind of, whether it was music or content that you were watching or anything that you said, you know what, I think I need to change. I don't know if this is good for me, or that you might have felt that way about?
Yeah, I remember. I think by nature, I've always kind of been a rule follower because I really didn't want to disappoint anyone. I really never wanted to look bad, especially for my parents or my teachers. I always wanted to be a people pleaser and have everybody like me. Right. And so I never wanted to ruffle any feathers. So I was almost always a rule follower. But there were some times in high school when we would study things in a religion class and I'd be like, oh, that's a sin? Okay, duly noted. I know I got to struggle with that, So there was some of that. And then I remember in college, just kind of the crew I was rolling with was really, it was the hip, cool thing to be into Christopher West's Theology of the Body courses. They were back before they had like video on the internet, back before YouTube. And so there were just like these like cassette tapes.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing one of my roommates watch one. And so Christopher West came and spoke there. We like all read his book. And we were like, it was like what we chatted about on a Friday and Saturday night was Christopher West and John Paul II and Theology of the Body. And of course the John Paul II Institute for Family, I forget exactly what it's called, but it's at Catholic University, and it's this whole institute where you can study and get a master's degree like in the theology of the body. So there's the professors there and the grad students. I remember several times some of the grad students would come and give a talk at a prayer group or something like that. So just Catholic U, I felt like in the early 2000s was just like flooded with theology of the body talk, and it was right around when John Mayer came out with Your Body is a Wonderland, and so we would like conversations about that. That was like planting the seed of Pop Culture Catechism. Yeah. So so I remember I was on the team for the freshman retreat as a sophomore, and me and a bunch of my friends, and I remember them talking about like the chastity session, and this talk, and I'd heard the word chastity, but I just thought it meant like saving sex for marriage. And they were like, and the one girl was like, no, chastity doesn't mean a no to sex. It means a yes to love. And I was like, whoa, that sounds deep. Explain that. And I just remember diving into a lot of this chastity stuff and getting John Paul II's Love and Responsibility, and just like this really dense philosophy book, and just devouring it because I couldn't get enough of it, feeling like this is explaining everything in my heart. This is explaining so much of what's been going on just in my heart since I turned 11 or 12, of the desires I have and like what I want and what I feel and the struggles I have and the passions I have. So I remember feeling very convicted by the chastity message in college. And also, so Catholic U is one of those interesting places, at least when I was there, that it's not like a super trad conservative place, and it's not like a super liberal social justice-y place. It's kind of got the best of both worlds. Then there's not really this divide that you see in a lot of the church, where if you go to a Jesuit school, they're going to be all about social justice, but not so much the other stuff. And I'm talking generalities here, of course, but if you go to, a more traditional Catholic school, they're going to have awesome liturgies, but like, you're probably never going to hear about like racism and stuff, Exactly. So Catholic U had like, a Pax Christi chapter and a pro-life chapter. So I remember like we would do homeless food runs where we'd go and like give food to all the homeless people. And I remember there was a guy that came to campus to talk about like sweatshops and like Nike shoes and how they're made in sweatshops and that sort of thing, and being really convicted by that and like the social justice message. But at the same time, it really seeing how it's social justice and being pro-life and chastity and all the messages that are popular with the left and the popular with the right are really all cohesive. And that was something I found really beautiful about Catholic social teaching, is it just gave me a better lens to see the world than just like, what are the Republicans saying? What are the Democrats saying? Like, there's this like more ancient wisdom. And like, yeah, we care about justice, but like justice has to do with like the family and the integrity of the family. So like, there's no party of social justice and a party of family values. Like family values and social justice go together. And it's not just like whatever author has said in the last 10 minutes. Social justice is like based on the writings of Jesus and the social teachings of the church. And so just diving into that stuff and just realizing like, wow, we have such a wealth of knowledge. And, especially our last few popes, I feel like have been prophetic. John Paul II, Benedict XVI, Pope Francis, just they use different phrases to describe a lot of the same sorts of things. Like John Paul II talked a lot about the culture of death. Pope Francis talks a lot about the throwaway culture. It's like different takes on the same problem in our crazy modern materialistic world. Right. So yeah, I love that about being Catholic.
Well, that sounds like a really, really beautiful environment that you're being able to be exposed to all these different, Catholicism in general is so diverse. There's so many diverse either ideas or different traditions. and to be able to be exposed to all of that and in person, because unfortunately, like I go to my parish. Has a very large community, beautiful community.
Yeah.
Outside of that, like my perspective of Catholicism is the internet, unfortunately,
Yeah.
and that's not a very healthy place to be, really. It's either all politics, it's all, you have the most vocal people being like ultra trad or ultra liberal, or then just labels everywhere, Pope splainer and modernist.
It's Catholicism filtered through the algorithm.
Yes, exactly. And I think that's very beautiful to be able to have been exposed to things like that, where not only do you see like the intellectual side, but you're also doing that, as you said, the social justice aspect of it. You're actually doing works of charity. You're going out there and getting your hands dirty and showing the love for another brother or sister in Christ. And I think that's beautiful.
It's something I've struggled with as trying to be a content creator, is not really fitting into a lot of those niches. And I think that the internet is great at helping people find their niche. And it's great that, there can be a band who makes this very particular type of music that, probably 5 people in each state love, but across the country, that's a fair amount of people, and they can make some money off that and get a following from that, because there's people in every country in the world, and there's going to be a few weird people just like them that like that thing. But it does kind of tend to put everybody in their box to like feed you exactly what it thinks you want to see. Right. And so and that can happen with the faith too, which is why I think it's church can't happen. There are lots of beautiful things about online, but church ultimately has to happen in person. This is people who watch my show are used to me saying this is like our advertisement at the end of every show. It's like, hey, if you loved this episode, like, bring an awakened Catholic speaker like me to come speak at your parish, because while online things can be great and you can get a good message, like, lives are changed in person for the most part. Like when we get together and we actually see each other and we can eat together. Like, so many of Jesus's transformational messages happened over a meal. Zacchaeus, come down from that tree. We're going to eat in your house tonight. Like the Last Supper, the woman at the well. It's a well. It's a meeting place where they're going to drink. And even when he sends out his 72 disciples, his first instructions, he says, when you go and enter a town, stay with the people and like eat and drink with them. And he gives this long list of things you're supposed to do, like heal the sick and speak peace. And the last thing on the list is preach the gospel. Before you preach the gospel, you're supposed to like go and say, peace be with you, and stay with them and eat with them and heal the sick. And then after you've done these things, then you preach the gospel. And I think a lot of times we skip to just trying to preach the gospel first. Yeah. And we miss out that like Jesus wasn't just preaching with his words. There was a lot of groundwork he was laying before that, so that hearts were soft enough to receive the seed. He was making fertile ground and preparing the ground for the seed to be planted. And I think all of us have hard hearts to some extent, and we need to get in rooms together and soften each other's hearts. I remember in college, I loved getting together with friends and discussing really controversial issues. I loved it. And we would get together, and afterwards, like, I just remember feeling very close to those friends, even though we disagreed. Those same friends now, that we don't see each other much, but we still have those same discussions on social media, on Twitter or Facebook. After I have an argument with one of them now, I feel more distance from them. Even though if we'd had that exact same conversation, said the exact same things in person, I would feel closer to them. Because it happens online, I feel further away from them, like there's something between us. And so I think it's so important for church to be church and for people to come together and spend time together, eat together, have fun together. So I really liked what you said about how you have to do all these actions before even preaching the gospel, because words can fall upon deaf ears, but like the actions are what sticks with us. And maybe you're preaching the gospel and I never even paid attention, but the fact that you came and when I was hungry, you gave me some food and shared a meal with me, and you just, out of the kindness of your heart, that speaks way louder than any words can. So, and I think that's why Jesus doesn't always give people straight answers.
Yeah.
Right. Because people say, well, what do you say about this, Jesus? And he's like, well, let me tell you about this widow,
Yeah.
or, are you the king of the Jews? And he's like, well, you just said it. He kind of tries to get around the direct question because he knows people are already, they're already cocked and loaded, ready to come back with their rebuttal, ready to write them off, ready to put them in this box. So I think that's, that's part of the genius of Jesus. So.
I agree. How did Pop Culture Catechism come about?
It's something that I've thought about for a long time, probably back in like 2012, 2013. It was kind of when YouTube was getting like really huge. I think YouTube started in 2007 and then like YouTubers became a thing and like probably 2012. And that's when Father Barron was doing his thing. And so he would do movie reviews sometimes. And then that's also when, I don't know if you're familiar with John Green and Hank Green, the Vlog brothers, but they do like Crash Course and SciShow and a bunch of cool stuff. And I was
actually I only know because they did like, I don't remember which book that became a movie. They probably have
Fault in Our Stars is the most famous.
There you go. That's probably all I really know about them.
Yeah. So, but I was just like, there needs to be a Catholic version of this. And so if you go back on my YouTube channel, I think they're still there, but like way back in like 2013, I made a couple like 10-minute videos that were, I didn't know what I was doing. Video editing. I had like a crappy camera and like no lighting at all. And I made like these cutesy little kind of funny apologetics videos. And I always wanted to do that more, but I just never had time for it while I was a full-time teacher. And it wasn't till, I became a stay-at-home dad and kind of was able to devote more time to that. And right about the same time as I was doing that, I got to know Nick De La Torre, who you also met at the conference.
Yeah, that's right.
He runs Awaken Catholic, and he and I had gotten to become friends just through the internet. And he invited me to become a speaker through Awaken Catholic and to be one of their shows of one of their podcasts. And I knew I wanted to do something with music because that was something that spoke to my heart. And a lot of times as a teacher in the classroom, I would have discussions around songs. I'd bring in Mumford and Sons and be like, all right, let's talk about chastity here. I'd bring in like a Kanye song and all right, let's talk about racism, or let's bring in a Muse song and talk about, violence and revolution and that sort of thing. So I was frequently doing that sort of thing. And I thought, we can make a show out of that. And so I really focused in on music at first. And then sometimes I did TV and shows as well, but music is more my wheelhouse. So I tend to focus there as much as possible. So, yeah.
Nice. That's cool. Cause we think about pop culture and it just sounds so superficial, right? And you think about whatever is the biggest hit that's right now, or whatever hit of the summer. And it sounds really superficial, but it's trying to appeal to the most common denominator. And that's something that, in one way or another, we might relate to, or it might have a hook that, we're all attracted to. Yeah. And in the end, music, film, TV shows, all that, it's an art and it's an expression of the human soul, or of human emotion. And so once you analyze any bit of human emotion, it's a lesson in theology ultimately. So I think it's really, really fascinating how you can get so much content of a video you have an episode of, it's like an hour 30 minutes or longer about one subject, and you could get so much out of it. So yeah, I think it's really interesting.
Thank you. Yeah, I've loved doing it, and it's been really neat for me to have my friends reach out to me who are watching the show and people I haven't talked to in a long time. And all of a sudden they're asking me these deep questions, these questions that I've been having for over a decade with my students and kids I've gone on retreats with, and college students I've mentored, and those sorts of things in the ministry. All of a sudden I'm starting to have these conversations with people I went to high school with, people I went to college with, my kids' friends, my neighbors. And I tend to overshare a little bit. Sometimes there's a little TMI on the episode, but people just feel free to like share stuff with me. And people come up to me and it's like, oh, I want to tell you about like my girlfriend in high school who had an abortion, or like, oh, we lost a baby, or like, oh, I'm like having a lot of trouble in my marriage. And they'll just like or I gave up a baby for I placed my baby for adoption, and like nobody knows that I even had a baby. So just like people come out of the woodwork to tell me these like things because they feel like I'm a safe place because of this show. So it's been really beautiful to see it connect with people. So, and we haven't gotten to publish as many episodes this year as I've wanted to, but we got a plan. We're coming back strong in 2025. So it's going to happen.
I'm excited to see that. Yeah. And so things like your podcast, and there's so much others where it's attractive to see, or I guess one of the strengths is when the presenter, in this case yourself or your guests, allow themselves to be vulnerable. Mm-hmm. And you say sometimes it's like too much information, but it's like it's very, very, very helpful. I remember in my journey back to the faith, it's like, okay, I am so sinful. Like being a good Catholic means like you're basically a saint all the time. And you have these, when I would try to make it to mass, it's like everything just looked picture perfect. Everyone in their beautiful dresses and nice button up shirts and shiny SUVs. Yeah. So it looks a certain way from the outside, but once you hear other people sharing like, hey, I struggle with all these sins, with all these addictions, or this has been my past and this is how I've overcome it, or I'm still currently struggling with these things. And it's like, oh my goodness, like it's not just me. And it takes such a big burden off your back, or you just, you feel so kind of freed of like, okay, it's not just me. Let me just confession and keep trying to get back up.
Yeah, because there can, especially in Christianity, there can be such a temptation to the facade. That I've got everything together. And that was something Jesus was so critical of is, you Pharisees, you whitewash tombs, you look all fancy and white and clean and pure on the outside, but inside you're this rotting corpse of a spiritual mess. You wash the outside of the cup and not the inside of the cup. Yeah. And, you see him, he tells the parable about the Pharisee and the tax collector who go up to the temple, and the Pharisee's got all the right things that he wears and does all the right things. And then the tax collector beats his breast and doesn't even look up to heaven. My Lord, have mercy on me, a sinner. And so just that humility to be able to stand in front of people and say, I'm not perfect. I've had struggles too. And St. Paul does this all through his letters. He says, we boast of our weakness. We boast in Christ. And, I am the foremost among sinners, he says at one point. And so I think that can be overdone. Like, I think you can share in like a, hey, look at me sort of way. I used to be a drug dealer. Doesn't that make me like kind of cool if you think about it? So I think there is a wrong way to do it, but I think as Christians, like we're supposed to share our struggles with one another and bear each other's burdens. And I think the power of story and testimony is really powerful.
That's what we're called to do as Christians, share those struggles with one another, help one another, help each other carry your cross too. I mean, even our Lord Jesus Christ had allowed, Simon to carry the cross. And I think that's a beautiful sign of how, if you see someone else struggling, go out and try to help them too.
Yes.
And also if you're struggling, carrying your cross, don't be prideful about it. You can allow someone else to come and help carry it with you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Mike, do you have anything else to share?
Well, just thanks. It's great to when we were at the conference together this summer. I know we chatted a few times, but it's nice to actually get to sit down and have a coherent conversation when there's not a bunch of people talking over each other at a smoky cigar lounge. Where we were.
I thought it was so funny. So again, I was already familiar with you and your channel.
Oh, nice.
The moment great. I saw you, like my brain was just blank. And I'm like, I don't know who this guy is, right? And I even saw your name tag and I saw Pop Culture Catechism. And I'm like, I don't know, I've never heard of this channel. And then it's like, I even heard you were talking to Matt Fradd saying, hey, I've had your sister on my channel.
Yeah.
And it still didn't click. And it was not until the next day. And then I think I told you, I'm like, wait a minute. Wait, you last night were telling, Matt Fradd about you had his sister Emma on your show. It's like, And I was like, hey, you guys were talking about Paramore. I'm like, oh yes, I totally remember that episode. Yeah. And it's like suddenly everything clicked. And it was funny because even with Nick De La Torre, I was familiar with all his videos too. I've seen him before, and like at the moment, I'm like, oh,
it's hard to forget the tattoo on the back of the head. He stands out in the crowd.
and you know, we met, and I'm like, and what do you do? And he just kind of chuckled. It's like, well, I do a lot of things.
He does do a lot of things. Yeah. Yeah. He and his wife are on pilgrimages in Rome right now.
Yeah, so, I saw that.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, Mike, where can people hear more about you, find you?
Yeah, so probably the most active I am on social media is Instagram. So if you go there, you'll actually see what I'm posting. And then my YouTube channel, Pop Culture Catechism, and it's also on every podcast platform. So if wherever you listen to podcasts, there you can go to MikeTenneyMusic.com, which is kind of the hub for like my speaking or whatever. If somebody's looking for a speaker or a band or a musician for something, I tend to do most of my stuff in like the DC, Arlington, Baltimore area, but I do travel a few times a year as well. I've been out to a bunch of different dioceses. So yeah, that's what I do as well. And of course the show Pop Culture Catechism.
Beautiful. Well, I'll be sure to have all the links down below in the description. Awesome. Be sure to subscribe to, I guess in this case, Pop Culture Catechism, right? Mm-hmm. So, Mike, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for sharing your story with us. And thank you for, if you made it this far, for watching. We'll see you next time.
Take care.